There was never harmony in both groups of leaders. Draper, for example, created the gold and silver from several churches and labeled the crates rice before he sent them away. And they all, of course, went to him. Drake, whom they named as the governor of Manila when they did take Manila, was stymied by the resistance force of men of Anda, and he was convicted of bribery, misappropriation of funds, and violation of the orders of the East India Company. Dismissed from the company, his sentence was commuted to just mere demotion in rank. He never married, and when he died in 1784, he left behind several Spanish paintings from Manila. I don't know where they are now. But many of the books that the Augustinians took from their convent here and other convents in Manila, in Intramuros actually, are either in the British Museum or some libraries in the United States. Some of them are in the Library of Congress of Washington, D.C. You can see that there. So anyway, that was really what happened. Now, what about the Filipino leaders? Archbishop Manuel Antonio Rojo de Vieira, the Mexican name, was characterized by Spanish writers, Spanish writers, as not necessarily a traitor, but a fool. That was his reputation. His immediate reaction was to send a boat when the fleet appeared, offering help because he thought they were stranded Chinese traders. Come, what do you need? He come to shore and that kind of thing. And of course, when they got the terse demand, surrender or, he lost. That's a strong statement. He did not know what to do. So he called the audiencia, the city council. But these members were all self-opinionated old men who earlier had not taken any action when rumors filtered in that the British in Madras, the East India Company, was deciding on planning Manila. They took no action. And when the British fleet appeared, they could not agree on what to do. So that was the situation. With a governor who had no strong willpower, his council not knowing what to do, self-opinion, disagreeing with one another, what can you do? That was the situation. The fiscal of the audiencia, Leandro de Viana, suggested to the archbishop that he should leave these things because you don't know it. But it fell on deaf ears. Leave the affair to the commanders of Santiago, the Fort San Felipe of Cavite. He would not listen. But he did one good thing. He said, let us organize resistance to the British attack. None of the older audiencia members accepted the idea. Then he turned to the youngest, Simon de Andes Salazar, who says, yes, I'll do it. And he escaped the day before the British entered Manila, October 5, coming up from Malate. If they did something, now these are the Spanish writers and the Dominican writers, because there was a squall in the Manila Bay, if they did something when the British were trying to land in Malate, they could have driven away the British. Because one boat sank with the army, the weapons there, and some of the troops. They could have driven away the British. They did nothing. Finally, the British found a breach in the wall of Intramuros because it was never repaired. One manuscript I read was that one parts were, dirt. The moat was filled with sand, so they could just walk across it. And then parts are like forests or gardens. Nobody paid attention to the wall. And this was this breach there, and they widen it. That's how they entered Manila, intramuros. So that is the situation. When the British appeared, the Spanish leader officers and the Filipinos behind them escaped, followed by the Spanish residents of Manila. But you see, just intramuros. Remember, Manila was only intramuros. So they followed them out of Manila. So that's the situation now. Who were the members of the audiencia? Santiago Orendain. Who was he? He had been convicted of serious misdemeanors, misappropriation of funds, and so on, and was confined at Fort Santiago. Dressed as a woman, he walked out in peace and sought refuge with the Recollects. And of course, because he was there confined by the fiscal, he looked for every opportunity to exact revenge on Leandro de Viana. So that is how he had some members. So anyway, when the British came, he led a group of Filipino volunteers, 400, you know that number, but they were repelled mercilessly. He changed his mind and decided to side with the British. Diego Silang ang Ilocos was his friend. Remember, Diego Silang and his co-revolutionary leaders were businessmen, so whenever Silang would come down to Manila, Orendain was his host. He convinced Silang to also repudiate his oath of allegiance to Spain and take the oath of allegiance to King George III of England. And yet Diego Silang is a patriot of the Philippines who had repudiated his oath of allegiance to the Spanish crown. Anomaly. I keep telling this to my students. I said, but he still, we have, and another incident here is, when he was murdered because he reneged on his promises, the Spanish mestizo, also a businessman, murdered him. His wife, widow, escaped. We have a statue of the widow of Estrada, Gabriela, riding a horse with a sword in her hand in Makati. Completely fiction. Because at that time, a woman who rides alone in a horse loses her udder. What did Gabriela do? She was hiding because she was afraid that they would look for her after her murder, the murder of her husband. And yet she's portrayed as having led the counter-revolution registered by her uncle. It's true they went house to house, or he went house to house at night. But again, that's a wrong story. That she is a hero. She is a heroine. So anyway, Santiago Orendain convinced Diego Silang to take the oath of allegiance. When the British came, he took their side. One of his daughters married a British soldier, but when Manila fell, they sailed away with the British troops, and when they reached Vietnam, abused the people there and were massacred. That's the end of Santiago Orendain. Another one, Francisco Enriquez de Villacorta. He wanted to resist at all cost. But Orendain denounced him to the British that he was in contact with Anda y Salazar. And they tried to get him because he was considered a traitor for his contacts with Anda. He avoided execution by Garrotteville by paying a fat bribe of 3,000 pesos. And then, of course, he went out, escaped. Nobody knows where he went because he could not join Anda, whom he wanted to supersede as the leader of the resistance. Later on, when peace returned, he went to the royal throne and claimed he had the right to be named as the Governor General of the Philippines. These are the story. It shows you the kind of people who are in the audiencia. Leandro de Viana, in one of his reports to the Crown, said, reforms will be impossible in the Philippines because you need angels there. But what do we have there?